Welcome back, everybody, to the Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would like to introduce Amanda Kate, the author of Divine Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence, kinesiologist, mentor, archetypal life coach, mother, and more. Amanda Kate helps people to regain their vitality, smashing through their internal glass ceiling and limitations to find new levels of health, vitality, and abundance. She also works with business owners to increase their vibration and attract greater wealth and prosperity. Welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast, Amanda.
Oh, thank you so much. I love your energy. So I'm so grateful to be here and I cannot wait to see where we take this.
I love your energy too, and welcome. I mean, it's incredible that we can connect 8,000 miles away, like just by the
Yeah,
click of a button.
absolutely. Oh, it blows my mind every time I'm on with people all over the world. It's, you know, I think back to my grandfather who was, in Holland in the Second World War and then came out to Australia on a boat with the family. And you just like I remember some of the things that came out as I was growing up, and he's like, whoa, like, how much have I seen in my lifetime? And so for him, like, even this bit would be that next step of mind blown if it was still here.
That is incredible, to actually put it that way, where somebody will go on a ship and go so far away, and it's like, right? Imagine what would he? I
Mm,
wonder how you would think of it now. All you have to do is push a
yeah,
button, and Lino is in California, and you're in Australia. That's amazing.
yeah, it is. It's
Digital
phenomenal.
sailing, digital
Yeah.
cruising. That's incredible. So, hey, Amanda, I'm curious about your journey. What brought you to where you are at today?
Oh, look, I think nobody gets to the healing arts and coaching and things like that without their fair share of trauma and life experience, shall we say. It is one of those things that is, it's been a life, it's been a full life. I grew up in a beautiful home. Mum and dad were amazing. They still are, love them to pieces. And also, they're human. We all have our failings. I recognize that I've traumatized my kids, and, they did their own thing of trauma for me. Now, trauma, just to get it really clear,
Yeah.
is not always the trauma that we think it is. It's not always disease and accidents and abuses and all of that. It is anything that our body stores as less than nourishing and nurturing. And so, oftentimes, as a child, because we were born into quite a religious family, there was a very narrow band of acceptable behavior. And if we went outside that, there was shouting, there was yelling, there was the occasional smack on the butt, there was, all of that kind of thing. And sometimes the transgressions weren't huge, or in my mind, they weren't huge, but all of a sudden I would have this, huge person shouting over me, and it would put me into a state of fear and terror. And I remember living like that. And I think I thought that my empathy was the superpower when I started finding spirituality in my late 30s. And what I've realized in the last few years is my empathy was actually a trauma response. Because if I could
Wow.
watch the behavior, and this is true for anyone who is empathic, usually you will find that it's a trauma response. For me, it was because my mother was quite explosive, and I completely understand why.
Mhm.
She had a horrific menstrual cycle, which I followed suit with, so I get it. And also, as a child, I didn't have that full understanding. So to me, it was just terrifying. But if I could watch and make sure that I kept her happy enough, and if I was a good enough girl, if I was, if I was good enough, if I could just be good enough, then she wouldn't need to explode at me, and then I wouldn't need to be afraid. And so I became hyper vigilant of watching for the behavior and watching the build up of that to see when it would happen so that I could protect myself. And with that realization, I guess I see my whole life very differently, because I've always had that empathy for other people. And I've also been very good at reading people and where they're at and where they're about to go, which is part again of that psychic senses that, we were talking about before we hit record, is actually being able to read the most probable direction of where things are going. But I recognize it now as it was a trauma response to try and keep myself out of trouble. And so there was a lot of this very narrow band stuff, which then meant that anything that fell outside that I was cutting off, hiding, repressing, suppressing, being ashamed of, being embarrassed about. And so a lot of my humanness I hid in a box. And it was just like, yeah, I can't do that. So I've got to keep that there. I can't do that. I've got to keep that there. You know, we weren't allowed to show anger. We weren't allowed to fight. It was like the worst thing in the world if we did that. And so again, all of this anger got hidden in that box as well. And all of these other emotions that weren't okay for girls to feel. Then as I went through my teenage years, I went through, the bullying from other children, and it was quite horrific at times, especially when I was in year 5. And then again, when I was in year 9, I went through some really horrible things. Um, and as a result of that, I've become this person who was always everybody's best friend when they had a falling out with their best friend. So they would come and they'd be best friends with me, and we would have the best, whether it be 6 months, 12 months, whatever. And then they'd make up with their best friend and I'd be ditched. And I was always on the outside of groups. So I guess I was an easy person to do that with, but I kept myself on the outside of the group because of the bullying. I never felt like I belonged. And even then at home, I couldn't show my true self and the full totality of who and what I was, because that wasn't good enough. It wasn't acceptable. It wasn't loved. It
So
was
showing
loved in
up
the best way they knew.
that hypervigilance was showing up in all of your relationships around you.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And in this complete lack of understanding of which bits of myself I could show comfortably. So I remember getting told off at work once for talking too much because I was trying to make conversation with customers. And he's going, "You talk about yourself too much." And I'm going, "But I'm asking them about their day." And I couldn't work it out. Um, and it was just because my brain was like, "But this is how we talk. This is how you make conversation." And my brain just couldn't put the things together. And, there's been lots of those kind of comments with me throughout my life where I just feel like I almost either overshared or I was aloof or, and naturally I was quite introverted, but that wasn't again necessarily acceptable because people were supposed to be extroverted, and you did better at school if you were extroverted, and you did better in life if you were extroverted. And so again, I kind of trained this persona of me to be this extroverted, confident, out there person, whereas inside I was just all of nerves and not living to my truth.
Mhm.
And so you can see then when I started dating, the choices were not the best. And I had a massive breakup, which was devastating to me. I thought he was the person I was going to marry and all that kind of stuff. What are you not, 19, 20, 21
Yeah,
when
right.
seriously.
Yeah.
Um, but, I was in that. And when we separated, I was just devastated. And so basically I ran away to the UK. My sister had invited me on her working holiday with her, and we were quite close at the time. So we we went traveling, and I ended up partying a bit too hard for a while there. Um, and then I met my then to be husband, now ex husband, and I saw the orange flags, I saw the red flags, and there was something in me that just didn't think I deserved any better. And so it was very controlling from the beginning. Again, there was that narrow band of acceptable behavior that I was supposed to behave within. And, there was just this control from the very beginning. I'd be in the middle of a really great night with my friends, and next thing, this hand on my back would kind of guide me. And next thing, I'd be sitting on the tube on the way home going, "But I thought we were having a really great night and having fun." And then I'd have been guided out, and he was going, "Well, I thought, you'd had enough to drink, or I thought it was time for us to get going." And I'd be like, "Okay, fair enough." But it was the beginning of that separation of me from those whom I love and cared
And once
about.
again, feeling those limitations that you already had gained this type of trauma as a kid.
Hmm, yeah. And also, well, if he's saying that I've had enough and it's time to go home, well, because I don't know myself, then maybe it's right. Maybe I need to be told that. And so that's kind of how it all began. And that relationship just got more and more toxic all the way through. It was never a great relationship. And I look back now and I know it was just this weird codependency. It was never love.
Hmm.
Um, he used to say to me, I'm perfect, so I know I've done nothing wrong, so it has to be your fault every time I had issues.
What?
I didn't actually know the word of narcissism until basically it was the day I left him, which was the beginning of 2016. And that week I had two sessions. One was with my psychologist and one was with a kinesiologist that I'd been working with for about 8 months. They were 2 days apart, and both of them said, okay, we've been working together for a while now. Go home and look up narcissistic personality disorder
Yeah.
because you need some answers and you are not going to get any better while you are still in this situation.
Until you get some understanding on the pattern that's going on here.
And I read it, and it was like all of these cogs just fit together. It was like my heart dropped out of my chest. I was going, how could I not have seen this? But, my first kinesiology session, which was in the April before that, was she said to me, you have no idea how emotionally abused you are, do you? And I could see it in other relationships, but I didn't see it with my ex-husband until, the August of that year. But I didn't know the depths of it until really the January. And then when I started learning about that, again, the trauma of being an empath with the trauma that he has of being a narcissist, it's, as people know, it's moths to flames.
Yes, absolutely. So then,
Mm.
what did you do for yourself after that? After figuring out, oh my goodness, this has been a pattern. This is what I've been attracting. This is what I've been involved in. How do you get yourself out of that? How do you pick up the pieces from there?
Well, it was interesting. I started studying kinesiology 6 months to the day it was. I was sitting in the classroom after my first session, and that was really the doorway that opened this whole new world to me of spirituality. Being in the church, I always loved the church, but I didn't necessarily like the people in it because they'd go in and they'd be holier than thou, and then they'd go out and be the same asshole they were before they walked
Yeah.
in. And that actions and words and actions not lining up is probably my biggest pet peeve. And that
Okay.
was the thing with my ex-husband. He would talk a great game, but there was never any change.
Right. Where's the
And there
alignment?
was, yes, there was none. And often that like smiles wouldn't reach the eyes. And even when he was pretending to be happy, there would be this underlying anger that you could see that was just barely contained. And it was like living with that kind of caged animal of I don't know what's coming next. And so I was constantly tightly wound, and that's where my chronic fatigue came from. A few years before I left the marriage, I was in that state of chronic fatigue because my physical body was breaking down
Mhm.
because I was in this constant state of nervous system distress, of
Yeah, your
hypervigilance.
cortisol levels were constantly high.
Oh,
You
yeah,
were beating your adrenal systems, your
yeah.
adrenal glands.
And from the time I was little, when I was watching for my mum's explosions.
Yeah.
And so, again, having that high functioning hypervigilance ended up just exhausting my body,
Yeah, of
completely
course
and
you're gonna
utterly
get
exhausting my
chronic
body.
fatigue from that. Your body
Mm,
is fed up. Your body's tired and exhausted.
yeah, yeah. And it was the universe really going, you need to look at this. And so once I dabbled in natural therapies before I found kinesiology. So I was seeing a naturopath, I was seeing a chiropractor, I was seeing a Chinese doctor, all of these different things. And every time I went to one, I'd be like, oh, maybe I study that, maybe I study that. Because I was at this point too where my children were starting to go to school. And I'd been a stay at home full time mum, because again, that's financial control. Kept me where I needed to be so that I wouldn't branch out too far. And every time I went back to work or got a job or did something, it would interfere with the family time. And so I was very quickly sort of maneuvered out of it because it was taking too much away from the family. And so there was this financial control going on as well. But I was getting to the point where the kids were at school. I knew I had a bit more time. I wanted something flexible. And so I was looking at all these different natural therapies, but I think kinesiology really talked to me because it pulls in lots of different bits. It is full mind, body, spirit. It is about the physical stuff that's happening in your body, the way the systems talk to each other, as well as the emotional suppression, as well as the mental, psychological. We look at everything.
Mhm.
And so it was the doorway that I went through that then found me back to my spirituality, not the spirituality of the church, not religion, but to my experience with God, my experience of the divine. I was a very peaceful child. And my mum always said, one day you'll get back to that. And I don't know why that sort of stuck in my mind, but that it feels like where I've come back to is that peace that I had within myself as a child, that knowing that there is something bigger out there. And so my journey through kinesiology was really one, unpacking all of those years of trauma, being able to understand it, being able to love people in spite of what they did and because of who they are, and being able to offer a lot more grace and empathy, not just to them, but to myself. And for years, I recognized that I was my own biggest abuser. The stuff that I was saying to myself in my head was way worse than anyone else could have thrown at me.
My goodness, right.
And it wasn't until that changed and I started to go, hmm, do I really deserve this? Huh. And all of a sudden, because that seesaw had changed the other way and I started to abuse myself less, then the questioning began, and that's when the marriage really started to fall apart into that toxicity, because it was around I was around 32, 33. And I read this article that said, women are at their sexiest around their early 30s. They've kind of left that insecurity of their 20s. They're really becoming who they are. And I was going, I am damn good.
Hmm.
And yet I'm being treated like I'm a piece of shit on the bottom of someone's shoe. And they're just trying to wipe me off all the time. There was no connection. There was no emotional anything. There was just pressure and coercion and control and nastiness. And I started pushing back, and that's really when the marriage started falling apart. And by the time I think I left when I was about 36, just before my 37th birthday. And so, in that sort of 5 years, was really me starting to question and starting to push back. And of course, if anyone knows a narcissist, you can't push back and break through their delusion of perfection,
Hmm.
because if you break through that delusion of perfection and let them know that they are not perfect, then that unleashes the other behaviors that are being, again, tightly
Yeah,
held
all those other
in
toxic
place.
behaviors. It's like a
Yeah.
domino effect.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, kinesiology just led me down that path, and as a result, I've studied all sorts of other things as well. And I just trust that the path I'm on is the path I'm on. And it wasn't easy leaving, because again, I was being financially controlled. I didn't have the finances myself. I hadn't worked in a long time,
Hmm.
and with his behavior, he was able to manipulate lawyers, including my lawyer, which was just ridiculous with his. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole other story. He was able to manipulate and control the child support system. Like, he just had that way about him. And so I missed out on quite a bit through that. But also, I went, I just have to stand strong in this.
Hmm.
I just have to stand strong. I just have to get out. And so, again, even, to the fact that he refused to leave the marital home after we separated. So we had to be under there for 6 months, under the same roof, with him, spreading all sorts of stories and lies. And when we were together, it was just hard and horrible. And the bullying was this cold, calculating, um, it was just awful. It was that soul chilling feeling of, I don't even know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Like, I don't know how cold and calculating this is. And it was terrifying. But I couldn't get the money then to get a rental to get the kids and I out of the house.
Hmm.
And so, again, there was all of this stuff that I was really stuck in. And I feel for any woman who's trying to leave a marriage like that, because, people often say you were so brave. And I'm going, there was no bravery about it. I could not stay. I
Right.
had no choice. I had to find a way out. And it was terrifying and it was hard. And I didn't know if I'd live through it. I
Hmm.
honestly didn't. I didn't know if that was the end of the road for me, if something would snap and I'd be gone.
That's a really, really
And
scary space to be in at that
it
point.
is, it's terrifying.
How did you gain the courage and the confidence to leave this traumatic relationship that you were in?
But again, there wasn't a choice. There was no choice to stay. So I had to keep taking those steps forward. And I also had to surrender to the fact that if this was the end of the road for me, if something was going to snap and I was going to be gone, that I just had to trust that that was the path I was supposed to walk. And because I couldn't stay,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting very, very sick because of the toxicity. My children were not flourishing. I
Mm-hmm.
was not flourishing. He was not flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us deserved better than that. He deserves to be loved in a way that he needs to be loved. My
Exactly.
children deserve to understand a better love. They needed to feel safety when they came home. They needed to feel unafraid.
Mm-hmm.
The toxicity was not healthy for anybody. And so the big question, and I ask my clients this often, is are you living the type of life that you would want your children to live?
That's an excellent question.
Now, I asked myself, is this the type of love? And, this was before me being fully aware of, gender roles and all of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I was going, is this the way I would want my son to love his future partner, his wife? Is this the way I would want my daughter to be loved by her husband? Obviously, I actually don't care who they're with. And that's why I then changed it. But my
Yeah.
original thing back then was, but I'm like, you know what? I don't want either of my children to show love in that way or to be loved in that way
Mm-hmm. That's not
from
love.
whomever it
Yeah.
is. It is not love. I saw a meme the other day and it made my blood boil. I've saved it because I need to not be angry when I write about this. But it said, something like the Beatles were wrong. Love is not all you need. You also need kindness. You also need respect. You also need this. You also need that. And I just went, you know what? We need to redefine what love is out there because
Right.
that's not love.
Right.
Control is not love. Meanness is not love.
Mm-hmm.
Disrespect is not love.
Mm-hmm.
It's not love. And what we think is that these damaged forms of love are this fairy tale, and I'm going to be able to save them, and they're going to be better, and they're going to change. They've got so much potential to change. Well, you know what? Everybody has potential to change, but
Yeah.
not everybody has the desire or courage to take those steps to dive into a healing journey
Right.
and to go to the depths of excavation of your soul that you need to go to fully heal.
Yes. And is this how you came up with your incredible title of Divine Messy Human?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I denied my divinity for so long. I papered over the cracks of my messiness. I tried to hold up this facade of perfection. And, I have the perfect husband and the perfect children and this perfect house, and we get the international travel. And it made my human experience so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I tap into that divinity, I accept and love that divinity. I know that we are all parts of the divine, that we are all messy as fuck,
Yeah.
that we do not have our shit together.
Right.
Nobody does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm starting to get my shit together actually. But,
Same.
for the most part, I'm still messy. I can still be reactive. I can still be defensive. I can still show unresourceful behaviors because I am human.
Uh-huh.
The difference now is I see my messiness. I have love and compassion for those parts of me that are being activated into messiness, that are those hurt children, those parts of myself I've denied, that are just trying to make themselves heard. And I can make reparation easier with the people I love because I can own my own mess, my own shit, and acknowledge that this is the bit that I'm spewing over you and you don't deserve that. And it's made my human experience so much better. It has increased my connection with other people. It has brought incredible people into my life that I connect with beautifully who are reciprocal in relationships. I didn't have reciprocal relationships until I left my marriage because I was so busy giving and giving and giving and giving and giving that there was literally nothing left of me. Once I started to learn how to receive and to expect to receive from the people I'm in communion with, all of a sudden everything got so much better, and I welcomed these beautiful people into my life.
Amanda, I'm wondering, so your book is a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external
Mm.
influence. And I mean, I can imagine that you talk about this receiving mode that you're talking about right now
Mm.
and what it takes to be in this receiving mode and expectation and stuff. But how did you actually first tap into your own divinity? I mean, and how do you teach people to tap into their own divinity?
I don't know that there was one thing that I did. It was a gradual progress. And I think this is it. People want that one pill, that, nervous system hack, or that whatever it is. Everybody wants the quick fix, and people are out there selling the quick fix.
They
My
are.
healing, I got to January this year and I had a meeting with my mentor, and I said to her, I know I can say this to you because you're not going to judge me and you're not going to think it's ego because you've been on this journey with me for so long. I said, I feel healed. Not, there's still work to do. Of course, there's
Sure.
still work to do. There is expansion and growth and learning and deepening of
Constantly.
the work and all of that. But I said, I feel healed. And it was interesting because it was 7 years since my divorce or separation. And I'd been with him for 14 years. And I remember at the beginning, somebody said to me, it'll take you probably half as long as it took you to get sick to get well.
Jeez. And they were right
And
on.
I was like, you are kidding me, aren't you? I can't do
Right.
this for 7 years. This is bullshit.
Right.
But actually, it was so true because I got to this place of full letting go and surrender and connection. And I'd been connecting into my divinity. I'd been learning how through my kinesiology, through my Reiki, through all of the energy work I did, through all of the modalities I was learning. I learned to tap into that divine part of myself and to access different realms of consciousness. I did some psychic and mediumship training. I've done so many different things. I went on a 10-day Vipassana, the silent meditation retreat. I've done a lot of those things, which really helped me to tap into that spirit. But I think part of it was knowing that all the way along, those orange flags, those red flags, all of it was my intuition saying, what the fuck are you
Yeah,
doing?
they're waving flags at you saying, "Hey, pay attention.
Yes.
Time to take a
Yeah,
new road."
exactly. And the thing that I talk about a lot in my work is that, you know, before I started to trust myself, I saw the intuition, I heard it, I got it. The flags were obvious. But I didn't trust myself enough to really do anything about it. And I certainly did not have the courage to act on it.
Mhm.
The difference now is I've played with smaller things that are less consequential than do I leave my marriage or not. But, I started small and I get my clients to start small. What do you want for lunch? You walk into a food court. What do you want for lunch? Oh, look, there's sushi and salads. You know what? I'm going to get sushi today because I really fancy it. If you went, oh, I'm going to get the salad because I feel like I should, but your body's going, but I really want the sushi.
Yeah,
You notice how you feel afterwards. Use
right.
those small, inconsequential things,
Yeah, most likely when
things
you
that
do
don't
the
matter.
thing that you initially didn't really want, you're gonna feel that didn't want feeling still after you do
Yeah,
the thing you didn't want.
yeah. And what I recognize is if the second we ask ourselves, is this person right for me? That question does not come into your mind if that person is right for you.
Exactly, right?
So why is that question coming in? But what happens is we trust our logical mind over our emotional mind
Hmm.
and over the feelings in our body because we've been taught, and again, this is that archetypal masculine and feminine, we've been taught that anything to do with the feminine is dirty and needs to be hidden away and cannot be loved and honored, which is the intuition, the emotion, it is the unseen stuff. And we have to, you know, deify the masculine, which is our logic and our control and our,
So
the
true.
rationality. And so we are taught to deny that entire half of ourselves, regardless of what gender we are. We both have these aspects within us. We
Yes.
are the
The
same as the yin
duality.
yang
Yeah.
style.
Oh,
There
yes.
is the masculine and the feminine, there is the feminine and the masculine, and they both come together to make the whole. And we are denying that entire half of ourself. Yet that half of ourself is the bit that reads the unseen. It is the bit that taps us into. And we need both
We do.
because one creates a container for the other so that the other feels safe. And that is the biggest thing for me in my healing, was getting me to a place where I felt safe, getting me to a place where I knew I would keep myself safe. That if somebody like my ex-husband came into my dating sphere, I'd be like, yeah, this is not happening. I'm not getting myself back into that again.
Right.
If anyone makes me feel unsafe in whatever way, you're gone. No,
Exactly.
no ifs, no buts about it. I respect myself enough now that I will keep myself safe. And that was really that big part of it, was getting to a point where I had these deep knowingnesses that I will keep myself safe, that I will listen to my intuition because it has never steered me wrong. What happens with the logical mind is it is limited.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of that masculinity, is to create focus and limit.
So true.
The feminine is unlimited. The universe is unlimited.
Right.
And so we are trying to place limits on the unlimited.
We're trying to place limits on expansion.
Mm,
That
yeah,
makes
because
no
expansion's
sense,
scary.
actually. Yeah.
And this is why I call that comfort zone the known zone. I
The
stayed
comfort
in my
zone, did you say the
marriage.
known is the comfort zone,
Yeah,
the known? Okay, that makes sense.
because it's the space that we know. I stayed in my marriage because I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what else was out there for me. And that was terrifying,
Yeah.
because this might have been hard and scary and abusive and not expansive at all and not loving at all. But what was outside of that? I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
People like us don't get divorced, you know.
Right, right,
Women don't leave rich, successful men
right.
unless they have mental health problems.
Exactly. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you if you do that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something wrong with me, not wrong
Right.
with the relationship, not wrong with
Exactly.
him. There was nothing wrong with him.
Sure.
And I lost most of my friends because of that kind of mindset.
Wow.
I lost almost everybody in my life because he was playing the victim of, she left me, woe is me, I'm so perfect. How could she leave me? She must be mentally disturbed. And nobody saw the truth through it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did, well, he has a big house with a pool, and, we may as well keep him on as a friend because she's in a small rental that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's this choice. And also when you stay single as a woman, I was single for 2 years while I was healing myself because I did not want to get into a relationship with the same kind of traumas that I went into my last one, because I knew what I would attract then.
Right.
Like attracts like. And I actually used Tinder as a personal development tool, in that, when I did put it up 2 years after, I'd go out on a few dates and go, okay, what is it in me that I have not healed that's attracting that?
That's
I would take my
excellent.
profile down. I would go and see my kinesiologist or one of the other healers I was working with. Okay, guys, we need to heal this. And
What
then
a
I'd put
great
my
way to
profile
heal
back up.
yourself and to figure out what it is you need to work on. Go on Tinder and see who you attract.
And then again, it was that I'd go on the next round of dates and be like, ooh, when I was developing that divine feminine within me, I attracted a lot of men who just wanted to dominate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is not why I'm just, working on that divine feminine part of me. I'm doing it to welcome in someone who is happy in their divine feminine, who is happy in their divine masculine,
Mm-hmm.
not somebody who's going to try and dominate that, because I've had that before. And so again, I'd take my profile down, we'd go off and work on it. And
What a great idea. So
yeah.
tell us about your book. How is it a spiritual guide for people? How does it help people?
Well, I think it's this. I was really nervous putting that on the cover. It was that whole, oh, who am I to call it that? Who am I to? That good old voice that I don't think will ever disappear in me, as much as I've spent thousands of dollars trying to. I can turn it down now, but it
Sure.
was like, who am I to write a spiritual book? But actually, it is. I go through,
Well, you are a spiritual being.
yeah, absolutely. But it took me, like I say, it was a big thing. I questioned it a number of times, going,
Yeah.
oh, can I actually say that?
Yes, you
But I
can.
talk about some of the physiology, some of why this happens, some of the
Oh,
concrete
great.
stuff,
Hmm.
because we need to understand trauma. We need to understand how our body reacts. We need to understand why this is happening.
Hmm.
And then I go into some more of the esoteric stuff. And I bring in the tools and techniques. So I talk about balancing our masculine and feminine. I talk about, our intuition and the psychic senses that we all have that we can develop and work with and play with to be able to read what's going on around us better and to be more in tune with our life and the world around us. I talk about emotional fluency, how important it is to recognize the emotions in our body and to be able to um, name the emotion, sit with the
Yeah.
emotion, process the emotion so that we're not fighting against it. Because when we fight against that emotion, it gets stuck in the body, it somatizes in the body. So
Yeah,
these
because when
somatic
you,
therapies
it
let them
becomes a
out.
resistance.
Yes. Yeah. Imagine punching a wall. That's kind of what you're doing when you're fighting against your emotions. Whereas if you're punching air, it's not going to hurt.
So true.
Now, it might feel scary because, again, the emotions sit in that more feminine realm. Oh, we don't want to feel emotions. You're hysterical, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Oh, you're too emotional. You're too sensitive.
Yeah.
I was told that throughout my childhood. You're too sensitive. You're too emotional. Well, what about you owning up to the fact that you're being an asshole right now
Yeah.
and that you're hurting me?
Sure. Hmm.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah. What
nice?
about that ownership? Right.
But that ownership doesn't come. It's so much easier to blame somebody else
Sure is.
for not taking your joke than it is for you to go, actually, my joke was a bit insensitive. I'm
So
sorry
much
about
easier
that.
to project than to reflect.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And that's kind of what I talk about as well is I mean, the last chapter in my book is called, because I use swearing in there, as I said to you before, I am a spiritual sailor. And I said, now for the
Yeah.
dirtiest word in the book, self-responsibility.
The
And that's
dirtiest,
my
the
last,
dirtiest word in the book is responsibility. Oh,
self-responsibility.
self-responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, right. Do you go
And
on
I
to
did,
explain why?
I just said, if you're not ready for this one, you can skip this chapter.
Oh.
Well, because we don't want to admit that we're being an asshole, do we? It
No,
doesn't feel nice.
no, it doesn't.
When I'm arguing with my partner and I turn around and I go, oh, you know what, honey? You don't deserve this. That's my shit, not yours. I'm sorry.
So you own up to it right away. Or does
I
it
do
take you some time
now.
to, oh, yeah, okay, that's wonderful.
Oh, I can do it in the middle of the argument. I start coaching it. Hang on.
Yeah.
There'll be something that pulls me up and I'll be like, hang on, how old am I now? And I'll ask myself, how old am I now? Okay, what was going on then that I'm feeling now
Hmm.
that is reactivating this age? Okay, what did I need back then? And it might be, I'm not feeling seen or heard or whatever.
Hmm.
Oh, you know what? This actually isn't to do with where we're at now. This instance may have activated and triggered this response, but what do I need to do about it rather than just offloading on somebody else?
Right.
And that's not an easy place to go to. And I've backed out of arguments before.
Hmm.
Or if I haven't, sometimes it'll be the next day. I'll go sheepishly and go, you know what happened last night? I'm so sorry. That wasn't you. This is what it was. This is what I've worked out. This is what led to it. And it creates an openness and a closeness because we can
Right.
both do that. And he will often come to me the next day and go, you know what? I was a cock last night. I'm really sorry.
And that's how
And
growth and expansion happens.
absolutely, because we're taking responsibility for us.
You're taking
And
responsibility and no and not going and not continuing the the ongoing trauma pattern.
yeah, absolutely. And like I say, it's not easy to say, I'm being an asshole right now. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Because we're not taught that.
Right.
I remember when my children were little, I would, if I lost my temper at them, which happened a lot, because of course I was just this tightly wound ball of, stress and tension, I would sit down with them afterwards and I go, look, I'm really, really sorry. You guys didn't deserve that. Mummy's tired or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And my mum would be like, you speak too much to those children. They don't understand. You don't need to do that. And I said, you don't know that they don't understand that. So even then, I kind of knew that they were little souls in these bodies.
Mhm.
And I'd say to her, you don't know that they don't understand that. She said, they don't. I said, that's fine. But I'm not going to stop this because one day they will understand.
Mhm.
And I had a chat with my daughter the other week, and she's sort of at the point, and we all go through it, where we realize that our parents are human and that they don't know all of the things.
Yeah.
And she rang me. She was quite devastated. She's going, oh my gosh, I've recognized some stuff in dad. And I said, well, the thing is, you've known I'm human and that I make mistakes and I fuck up all the time because I've told you, and we've been
How old
really
is your
open and
daughter?
honest about this. She's 15.
Okay.
And so I said to her, you know, you've known I'm human. I said, but I remember when I realized that my parents were human and that they were fallible and that they weren't perfect and that they weren't, and it was devastating. So I said, I completely get where you're at because your dad has been one of those parents who has seemed perfect to you. And, you know, just he's my dad
Mhm.
in that way of, you know, that hero that I said, so of course, when you find out he's human, it's going to be devastating.
Right.
And also now you can grow into that next phase of loving him as a human
Having
and
compassion
accepting
for
him
him.
as a human. Yeah. And I said, but you know, the reason you're not going to have that same feeling with me is because I've always told you. Like from the time you were tiny, I've gone, yep, that was me. That wasn't you. I'm really sorry about that. You know, I made a mistake here. I shouldn't have done that. Whatever it is.
Right.
So I said, you're not going to have that same devastation. And so it's that kind of thing. But owning up to that and saying those words isn't always the easy path to take.
No, it isn't. Hey, Amanda, so you also call yourself an archetypal life coach. I've
Mm,
never heard of that. What is an archetypal
yeah.
life coach? How do you help people in that way?
So it is, oh, I love doing this work. It is so amazing. Basically, we take people through this process where we find their passion and purpose archetypes, which are their genius flow. So when you are in your genius and when you are in that flow state, it always happens with the same four archetypes leading the way in that same order. The way you do anything that you are successful in
Mhm.
is in that order. Likewise, all of the problems in your life
Yeah.
will follow the same prescription. So the
So,
other four of the same, well, okay, I'll give you my example. So my genius flow works that everything I do is to nurture other people. But I can't nurture other people if I don't nurture myself. So nurturing is that nurturer is one of my main archetypes. She kind of starts the process. So I want to nurture others. I want to nurture myself so that I can nurture others. Then I go and get the guidance and tune into that oracle part of myself to be able to gain the downloads and receive what I need to receive, to be able to then put the learnings that I have around that and take that work out into the world.
okay.
Now, everything I do is that, whether it's a project in my old corporate life, whether it's something I do successfully at home, that is my flow. That's the way I do everything. It is the nurturing, the receiving of the knowledge or the wisdom from, you know, other realms, putting the physical stuff I know and I've learned around that, and how do I then teach that to others, and then I take it out into the world. Every single one of my problems comes in because that taking it out into the world part gets overwhelmed.
Mhm.
I then go into self doubt, which is my shadow side. This then becomes all of the other archetypes in shadow. I then don't show myself enough love. I doubt myself. I'm then going, well, all I need now is another idea. I have to get another idea because if I get another idea, then I'll be able to fix this problem. But I can't focus on any of the ideas to be able to work on
Mhm.
those problems. And then I just go stay in overwhelm and I don't do
Yeah.
anything and there's no action.
Right.
And so knowing that means that I can pick up my problem pattern before I get into this discombobulation part. I can recognize when I'm feeling overwhelmed and I go into self doubt. And then I can go back and go, okay, how do I nurture myself enough to start the genius flow part again rather than
Yeah.
going staying in my problem pattern? And it's phenomenal. So you learn about those main eight archetypes. But then there's other archetypal flows as well that really help you to transform things in your life or to go through growth cycles. And it's just phenomenal work. So I learned through a lady called Pip McKay, who runs the Evolve Now Coaching Academy in Australia. And she is the only person who teaches it like this in the world. And it's like that pinnacle, the top of the archetypes. It's like that purity of it. The Jungian ones sort of sit underneath this. And it's just unbelievable. Like, I love working with people in this way. So even if you've done a lot of work, I've found that people have just, I trained somebody who was an NLP master trainer.
Mhm.
I took them through all this work and they went, I have done a lot of clearings. I had no idea I still had all that shit sitting there. So we clear out a whole bunch of stuff and then we can obviously work on the archetypes, because some of the archetypes you might not be expressing.
How do you define, Amanda, archetype
Mm.
or archetypal in this context?
So it's about working with that pinnacle of human behavior. So the arch, the top of the arch,
Mm-hmm.
that's the archetype.
Okay.
And then
Kind
everything
of like
else
a
sort of falls
pyramid.
from there. Well, if you think about like an arched doorway or something
Right,
like that,
right, right.
the arch where it meets at the top is the pinnacle. That's the
Mm-hmm.
bit of strength that holds the arch together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're really looking at. If we have all of our top 22 archetypes in full alignment, then we are enlightened.
Wow.
Clearly, got some work to do still, but that's all right. But it also means that, if I'm having trouble in one area of my life, I can go and look at, archetypally, okay, which archetype here am I working on that's going to sort of bump up some of the others? Which one do I need to work with right now?
What are some examples of archetypes?
So I have to be quite careful with what I say about this, because I'm not allowed to teach this to many people. I can teach it
Okay.
one-on-one in clinic. That's the way the work is set up, and we sign a contract for that. So I can use the idea of, say the nurturer.
Okay.
That nurturing archetype for me, when she's in shadow, she's not nurturing herself at all. Or
Yeah.
she's doing too much nurturing of other people and not looking after herself.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Which
she's
is the
spending all of her.
hypervigilance.
Yeah, absolutely. So she was in shadow most of my life. I was nurturing everybody but myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's in void, there's none of that happening. So you're not nurturing yourself, you're not nurturing anybody else. It's just not there. So we have a lot, and that's why we need to do the deep clearing work before we go on to find those archetypes, because we need to clear out the stuff that's keeping them hidden or keeping them in void, or making you overexpress them in the world that isn't in your highest good. The sage is another well-known one that's also mentioned in the Jungian archetypes. And so for me, when my sage is going, crazy, that's when I'm searching for my next course to do online,
Mm-hmm.
because I am the ever-present student, and because I want to learn more stuff so I can teach more people more stuff so that they understand themselves better. And so again, when she's out of control, she's wanting the next course and the next course, and what else do I need to learn? What book do I need to read now? It's always that gathering of information, but I'm not necessarily embodying the information, turning it into wisdom through my lived experience so that I can teach it to other people. It's just like this knowledge gathering.
Almost like overactive. Almost like
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
And so in that
And so,
case, yeah, it's an overproduction of something that's not gonna help with the balancing act.
yeah, exactly. It's an out of harmony. It's like having sharp or flat instruments in your orchestra.
Makes
So we
sense.
want everybody to be in tune. And that's the way that I really use it in my life. I can now recognize, oh, this one's doing too much work. I need to back off on this one. Which one could help me to then get myself back into flow, to allow myself to make this easier on myself?
That makes
And
sense.
often it comes back to me going, go and have an infrared sauna, or go have a bath, or go for a walk on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
It's often more me slowing down
Yeah.
that then allows me to sort of restart that genius flow and that pattern.
I love that. And again, that
Mm,
genius flow is like you were saying, nurturing your inner genius.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
what you're doing at that point when you're slowing down. You're nurturing that inner genius.
Mm. And part of the reason we can't always recognize or hear our intuition is because we are so busy doing, we're not spending enough time being. And so our intuitive voice gets shouted over by all of this loud external noise
Yeah.
and we don't hear it.
And that makes so much sense. That's what I've heard before. You're human beings, not human doings.
Yeah, exactly. But it's putting it into practice.
Right. Yeah. How do
Yeah,
you become a human being?
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's a
Yeah.
practice because it's taken me a long time to get to that, you know.
So hey Amanda, I how can people find your book? And I understand that you have got two different titles.
I do. And they're both actually available on Amazon. So I had a working title that I did not want to release in the US because of a choice word on the cover. As I did say, I'm a spiritual sailor. So I
Yeah.
have Divine Messy Human. They're both on Amazon. They're both on Kindle. The other title is Don't Let That Cunt Steal Your Bricks.
Don't
And it was
let
actually
that
a met.
okay.
Don't
Don't
let
let
that
that
cunt
C
steal your
word steal your
bricks.
bricks. So
Yes.
how did you come up with that title and how did you change it to to
Divine Messy
Divine
Human.
Messy Human?
Well, the first title, which was the working title with the C word in, it was actually a the night I went to the police station and they were telling me to get an IVO against my ex-husband and that I was in a domestic violence situation and all of this. I was actually on my way to a women's circle and I was obviously just completely blown apart, discombobulated. I'd never thought of myself as a domestic violence victim before. And that's a whole other thing to get your head around. Um, and anyway, I ended up going to this women's circle and I can't even remember if I spoke or whatever, but she took us into this meditation. I met, it was to meet your inner wise person. You do all the normal things that you do in the meditation. You go into your safe sanctuary and, you lay down and your inner wise person comes. And so I kind of saw it as my small self. And then my inner wise person was like this bigger energy that just encompassed me. And I was just, what do I do? And we were guided then to get a message from our inner wise person, and mine said, "You've done amazing work. You are starting to create some really strong foundations. You are almost ready to start building up. Just don't let that cunt steal your bricks." And
Oh
And
wow.
I nearly burst out laughing because I'm like, yeah, that's my inner wise person. Like, if ever I thought this stuff was just woo woo bullshit, that's pretty much proven to me that
Sure.
it's not.
And so then you decided to change it because people in the
Yeah.
US didn't really receive
Uh,
that
it was
title.
it was also about it wasn't just about the US, it was also about the fact that that would have then, you know, like that song that you probably think this book is about
Yeah.
you, don't you? So he would have just arced up and it just wasn't
I
worth it.
see.
And I also don't want it to be bought for the shock value. I want it to be bought because of the work, because the work in there is the important stuff.
Yes. Yeah,
And
I
so
love Divine Messy
that's
Human. Yeah, I love them both
mm.
actually.
Oh, look, I used to use the hash, or I still use the hashtag making your messy human experience less messy.
Yeah.
And so when I was looking for an alternate title, because I was just so stuck on having the other one, I went, okay, guys, give me the answer. And the next morning I woke up and I went, I'm just going to print two titles because a whole heap of my friends obviously wanted the one with the C word on it. And then I was like, I'm going to print two titles. So I rang my editor and I said, we're going to print two titles. She said, oh, that hasn't been done before. And I said, well, we're doing it now. Same contents, just different cover. And then I said, well, let me have a think through the day. And then I came up with Messily Human. And then it came in going, we can't just talk about the messy human bit. We have to have the divine because we are all spiritual creatures.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
that's how it
Beautiful.
came about.
Awesome.
Mm.
Amanda Kate, everybody here on A Little Less Fear podcast, the author of Divine Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence, available on Amazon, Amazon Kindle. How can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you if they would like to work with an archetypal life coach as yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am at amandakate.com.au. So just spelt exactly the way it sounds, really easy. And all my social links are there. So it's the easiest place to start. And I offer a free 20-minute call to anyone who just wants to connect. If people can't find the right time zones, I fit them in. So just they can contact me through my email and we'll be able to work out something that works for both time zones. So easy.
Amanda Kate, everybody, thank you so much, Amanda. I love your energy and your incredible wisdom, and you just keep being that divine, messy human. I love it. So nice to meet
Thank
you.
you
Thank you
so
for being on a
much.
Little Less Fear podcast.
Thank you.